Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Everyday Leader. I'm your host, Dr. Ananya. I'm here today with another amazing guest, Michael. So, we're getting ready for an interesting conversation. Uh, Michael, welcome. Welcome to The Everyday Leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you
It's
for
great.
having me.
It's great to have you here. So for people who don't know you, who are you? And tell us your journey and your what you've been up to so far.
Hmm. Okay. I am Michael Erhayanmen, and I was born and raised here in Nigeria. I'm actually calling in from Nigeria. So I was born and raised in Nigeria. Um, I'm a health professional, a graduate of microbiology, rounding off my training as a medical doctor. um, what else should I say about myself? Um, Essentially, I was born and raised in a very little community in Nigeria where I've had my primary education, secondary education, and then I had to go for my tertiary education as well. So that's just a simple rundown of who I am.
Yeah, I think you're being shy about it because I know you're involved in a lot of significant projects. I know you're in global health, and you do a lot of work with also Rotary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've also organized a TEDx, actually. So you do a lot of stuff, but I like the humbleness.
Thank you.
So, um, first of all, shout out to Nigeria. Nigeria has been taking the lead when it comes to whether it's healthcare advancement in Africa or when it comes to business and even sometimes politics. Even though I know certain people may not be happy with what's going on in your country, but Nigeria is always in the spotlight, right, when it
Mm.
comes to Africa. Um, so what has been your experience? You've worked in that system, in the Nigerian healthcare system. What has been your observation so far? What are the good things that you have as a country, and what are maybe the weaknesses that you see and that can potentially benefit from some sort of intervention?
Okay. Like you rightly said, Nigeria is one of the countries that leads in Africa. Apart from the fact that we have the largest population, and we pride ourselves as, the most populous Black nation in the world, not just in Africa. And that gives us an edge, such that we are able to lead in so many ways. We are well over 250 million people as a nation, and we thrive in a lot of things. Um, but that does not also go without saying that we have some of our challenges as well. But I think I would like you had rightly said, I would like to start by talking about some of the beautiful things about our healthcare system. Even though we have a lot of challenges, more than the amazing things that we do have in our healthcare system, our healthcare system again should be one of the largest, in Africa, especially because of our population as well. We have we thrive in a number of things. We have most of the specialties in Nigeria, talking about neurosurgery, for instance, orthopedic surgery, talking about medicine and surgery generally. We have most of the specialties, but that does not also um, rule out the fact that we don't have our challenges. While we are able to at some points, to a very large extent, cater for our population. In terms of manpower, we train, one of the highest numbers of doctors that comes out of Africa, right? We have amazing medical schools that train medical students. We have a lot of them in Nigeria. Some that are funded by the government. When I mean funded by the government, they are government owned, and we also have private institutions that are training medical doctors. And so, in a year, we have a lot of medical doctors that are coming out of the system. That is one area I think Nigeria is thriving. We have a lot of medical doctors. But on the other hand, because of the challenges that we have that bedevils our system, lack of infrastructure, no proper real-time training, advanced training of our doctors, because we do not have the necessary equipment, we do not have the infrastructure, like I said, to continue postgraduate training, such that we should have a robust number of special doctors. And when I mean special doctors, I mean consultants in different specialties and different fields. That is currently eating deep into the healthcare system of Nigeria. So we are having a lot of migrating doctors out of our system. We have a lot of students, medical doctors who just recently graduating, and their next step is to take the exams, maybe the USMLE, or take the PLAB, or take the Australian pathway or the Canadian pathway to get out of the country. And so there is this thing we call the Japa syndrome in Nigeria that is currently a syndrome. It is a problem. It is a plague that is plaguing our healthcare system. So yes, we have our successes, and like I mentioned, some of them are the fact that we have a large number of medical doctors being trained from our system. But on the other hand, we have a challenge of these doctors not willing to stay back because there are no proper infrastructure, no proper system that would reward them for their services back to the nation, or their trainings to eventually make them become special doctors, as it were. So yeah.
Yeah, that is actually very true. There are a lot of Nigerian trained doctors all over the world. It's amazing. Um, I think maybe I know that is true for my country, Ethiopia. We have fewer number of doctors within the country compared to, I think, a very, like, not even the United States as a whole, but like one specific state in the United States have more Ethiopian doctors than we have in the entire country, which is just crazy. So yeah, there is some shocking data out there, that
Quite
obviously
sad.
shows, yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of brain drain.
Yeah.
um Interesting. So knowing this, because this is obvious, like sometimes, yes, you do gain a lot of insight when you're in the system, but sometimes you also see from even the outside, right? So seeing all this, you still pursued a career in healthcare. So how did that decision come about? Were there any mentors, anything that really uh, inspired you to get into the profession?
Okay. So you had earlier asked about my background, and I just gave a brief summary. So my life's journey started in a very remote community in Nigeria, where access to quality education, healthcare, and the basic amenities were very, very scarce. The best way I describe my community is one that had just one public secondary school which I attended, and we had no science teachers at the time. We had only one hospital which was on and off service, and for us to be able to get water for basic consumption, we had to walk like 3 to 5 kilometers daily to be able to get water that we would consume. So growing up, I saw a lot of people suffer, not because disease were untreatable, but because the system had failed them. So it was a big time challenge. In fact, I had a classmate at the time, was about 15, 16, 17 years old, in that range, maybe an average of 17 years old, who still had cleft lip up to that age, right? And we had a number of young people who had club foots that had, gone on to become permanent disfiguration. So I could go on and on to mention some others, to you. For instance, severe malaria was normal. Convulsion among children was normal, and children who had convulsion, we had to be treated with concussion. I had my younger brother at the time had convulsion once, and my mom was told to get cow urine and mix with something else for him to drink, right? Splenomegaly that comes from severe malaria, for instance, as well. Children had to be cut, they had to be given incisions in their abdomen, with the idea that that may help. So there were a lot of things that were really happening. But one of those experiences that had shaped me to, you know, that shaped my idea and thought and really made me decide to want to do medicine was when my dad had a ghastly accident when I was very young. I think I should be 11, 12 years old at the time. He had this ghastly accident that almost claimed his limb. He was, sent to we call them traditional bone setters here. So he was sent to traditional bone setters for them to work on his. He had a fractured tibia and fibula at the time, but for the timely intervention of one of my uncles from the cities who came around and referred him to a tertiary hospital, you know, and that was how his limb was salvaged. It was then and then I said to myself, I want to do medicine. I want to study medicine. I was still young at the time, 11, 12. I think I should be in either GS1, GSS1, junior secondary school, 1 or 2 at the time. So that shaped my decision to want to study medicine and eventually focus in orthopedic surgery. And when I got into the system, I discovered that there was something called global surgery, and that global surgery could give me the opportunity to mix my passion and my drive for community advocacy, especially when it comes to surgical interventions. So for me, these were some of the things that had contributed to my stories, that has contributed to my experience, and currently my passion to want to reach underserved communities, for instance, where I come from as well, is something I want to contribute back. Bringing surgical interventions to the far to reach community, to the underserved communities. So that is what it is for me. And Nigeria almost embodies that. Everywhere you go to, Nigeria is one of those countries who contributes to the over 5 billion people, or 1 billion people rather, who do not have access to quality surgical care. And I feel that I can contribute to that, and that is one of the things that is driving me currently.
That is so inspiring. There's a lot of passion and compassion just hearing you talk about that, and it's very beautiful. And
Thank you.
it arises from a very personal experience and very early in your life
Mhm.
as well. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
I guess I kind of see why what your drive and purpose is and what you're telling me, and it makes sense to see you involved in different organizations that you're currently involved in, whether it's the G4 Alliance, whether it's the Torch, or Rotary. So why is advocacy important to you, and what what areas are closest to your heart? Because we can't change everything and we can't do
Yeah.
everything as an individual, but what areas are most important to you?
Okay. So when when you have an experience like mine, coming from a very remote community where sometimes it's quite difficult to explain and describe where your experience is. But I think empathy would be one of the easiest way for people to relate with what your experiences are. And so if you're having such experiences and you're coming from such an environment, you would you would almost discover that one of the only way to drive home your point would be to talk about it. And advocacy is one of the tools for you to be able to do that. And so what advocacy does for me is that it helps me to bridge the gap between what we know and what we practice. If you're a doctor, um, you find patients who come to your clinic with experiences like mine. What advocacy would help you to do is to make a very loud noise or make a very loud statement about what you see and what other people know. So for me, it helps me to bridge that gap. Okay, and so it's important that we fix the structures. We fix structures. We fix system. There is a default in our system. There is a problem with the system. And what advocacy for me helped me to do is to bring out those abandoned areas in our system, talk about them, raise awareness about them, and see how much the government as well as other parastatals can come together to create a bridge, right? And so that is why I'm involved with most of these organizations. G4 Alliance, my involvement with them is that they bring surgical health interventions or make a lot of advocacy about bringing surgical interventions far to reach communities and and environments such as the one I'm coming from, or such as the place. Then TROG, for instance, gives me an opportunity to raise awareness about surgical education. And I'm working currently as the Associate Global Education and Training Director, right? And it helps bring an idea on that. Rotary is another organization that is global and really very deep on bringing interventions to communities. And so joining these organizations would help me, right, to raise awareness through advocacy, talk about what we lack, talk about what's possible, how these interventions can come. So it is enough to talk about, oh, we have issues with our system, but how do we salvage these issues? Profiling solutions. I may not be able to directly profile those solutions, but I should be able to make recommendations that, oh, there is a problem, and this is what we can do to salvage this issue. And so that is one of the things that um, advocacy does for me, and joining these organizations really, really do for me. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it just goes to show you how we're really interdependent. Sometimes it's easy to think
Yeah.
the systems that we're in, the global north and the global south, as they call it, um, are very independent, but they're really not. We're very interdependent, and we need each other's input to grow the healthcare systems on either side of the aisle.
Exactly.
Like you mentioned
Exactly.
earlier, you have brain drain because the North have a system, but they don't have enough manpower. And then you come to the global South on the other side of the aisle, where you have a lot of manpower resources and a lot of people to train, but you don't actually might not have the financial or physical resources to
Mhm.
match that. So
Mhm.
we need each other, and it's very interdependent. And I think, like you said, it's very important for doctors to work with organizations that have visions and missions that align with the mission and vision that we have.
Yeah.
So I can hear a lot of I can hear that you're a teacher. You value academics, of course,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
teaching is just not in the classroom. Especially nowadays with social media and advancement of technology, teaching has morphed into this whole new um, different arena, right? It's not the way
Yeah.
it used to be.
Yeah.
And one of those platforms is the TED Talk platforms. And I've seen that you've organized a TEDx event a couple of years back. What inspired
Twice.
that?
Yeah.
Twice, exactly. So what inspired that? What was the goal that you wanted to achieve? What was the vision, and how did the audience respond?
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So TEDx AAU Ekuma, right, was born out of a simple conviction that great ideas can actually come from underserved places. You hear me say underserved communities, you hear me say low resource communities, and that is because that is my story. That is where I'm coming from, right? Hoping that will change the narrative in the future, but my past cannot be erased. That is where I'm coming from, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to make a lot of difference from where I'm coming from. So, TEDx AAU, because of my deep passion for young people's development. I'm a youth advocate. I'm a youth development advocate, a very deep one at that. Because I believe that when young people are empowered, there is a lot of good that can come from that, a lot of good. And TEDx gives that opportunity, gives that platform. So I wanted the young people in my community to believe that they can as well. We see a lot of TED events holding all over the world, TEDx event rather, holding all over the world, and how much those events are sparking change, are creating the effect that we need. And when I saw the one I did attend, I said to myself, why not? My own community also benefits from something like this. And because TED is a platform that allows for local story sharing. You should relate to your own story more. So I felt, let's hear from people who made a lot of impact in my community. And hopefully their stories will be able to inspire change in the lives of other young people. And that is how we started. And in 2023, we hosted the first one. We had over 400 people come together, over 400 young people rather, come under one roof to hear our TEDx speakers to event. And after that event, and we saw the success that we had in 2023, we were like, why not? We can still host one more. And in 2025, just in May, on May 17th, we hosted the second edition of TEDx AAU, an amazing event, close to 1,000 people came under one roof as well to hear our speakers speak. And I've been receiving, testimonies upon testimonies of how that event had inspired change. I can tell you categorically that after that event, we've had well over 5 other events I can lay my fingers on. Well over 5 events that have erupted from that idea, from that event that we hosted, and from the success that we pulled out. 5 events, and the last one was on the International Day of the Girl Child, where over 500 young people, young girls, were gathered in the same event, in the same hall that we used, all coming from the spark that we inspired from our event. So what I'm trying to say is that it is possible to have great ideas also come from very remote areas, very underserved communities, very far to reach communities, very low resource communities. That we are low resource does not mean that we are low resource on ideas. And the possibility of change can come from scarcity as well. Yeah. So that was one of the things that inspired me. That in our community we can also have change, we can also have impact, and impact is the underlying foundation on which our event is built.
Yeah, that's so inspiring. And I love that you mentioned, you kept mentioning, just because we are from a low resource setting. And that is actually something that people really need to understand, because
Yeah.
solutions don't come from a place of comfort, or creativity doesn't usually come from a place of comfort, right?
True.
Even in music, right, or arts, usually
Yeah.
it's the broken, the hurt people, that make the greatest piece of art. And it's the same thing. It's usually the challenge that we face that inspire us to think outside of the box, be more resourceful with what we have,
Yeah.
and come up with new things. So it
True.
really goes to highlight that. And I love that the TED Talks have done this TEDx branch where people can self-organize according to a certain guideline. So it's great, like you said, there are stories and inspirational uh, stories that needs to be told, that need to be heard everywhere, no
Yeah.
matter where we are. So
True.
that's really, really great. And the youth is very important. A lot of things, a lot of investment needs to go into the youth to really make a long lasting impact.
Impact on change. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're obviously a storyteller. You know, from the moment we started this interview till this point, you have this way of telling your story and using your life experiences as inspirations. So what narrative are you trying to share with African youth? Because we've had been given a certain narrative. Okay, we will not dive deep into that, but it is not, it is usually a narrative that makes us Africans and the African youth to see ourselves in a negative lens. So how do we change that,
Yeah.
and what is the narrative you're trying to reintroduce to the African youth?
Hmm. Okay. So yeah, I think one of the TED talks that I love, one of the TED talks that I love is by Chimamanda Adichie. I don't know if you know her, an amazing writer. She does amazing work. So she did this TED talk where she talked about the danger of a single story, right? And the whole idea that comes from that is that when you allow people tell your own story, they tell from their lenses, from the way they see, not from the way you see. So they are able to tell your experiences off from their own experience. But when you tell your own story, it means you're telling your own side and it becomes a balanced story. So there is a challenge with a single-sided story when you allow people tell your own story. And that is what has been going on with us as African youths. We've allowed people tell our own stories. And so for me, storytelling is, it's at the heart of how I lead and how I teach, because I believe that stories have power. Um, they have the power to connect us, remind us of our humanity, and make complex ideas very relatable. You know, I also believe that stories are a means to experience and make people not just live or see from your experience, but also live in your experience. And so my message to the African youth would be very simple. One, first, tell your story. Tell your story, because what we have been told is that our backgrounds to relegate us, to leave us where we are. People share the stories, the narrative that we as Africans are a poor continent, we are a very little resource continent, we are a third world, we are mostly third world nations, and so on and so forth. But the truth is, as African youths, we must know that when we begin to share our stories, and what I want to tell them rather is that you should not allow your background shape you. Your background may have shaped you rather, but it shouldn't define your limits. We have a lot of limitations already, and that is why one of our the team we had for our first event in 2023, Beyond Borders, and the idea that came from that, the story we wanted to share with that, was that you may be coming from an environment that does not look like where you are going to, but you should not allow those borders, you should not allow your environment limit you. And so you should be willing to break beyond those borders. And so our background as African youths may have shaped us. And that is why I'm saying that I may have a background, I may have a story, but those stories should not limit how much I can do. We can rise. Young people in Africa can rise beyond their barriers. They can create solutions. We can begin to tell our stories about the possibilities in our continent. What is possible from our continent? It may be difficult, it may be hard. We may need collaborative efforts from our counterpart continents and counterpart nations. We may need collaborations, but we must always know that for us to forge the change that we need, although we may do it in alliance with others, but we have the sole responsibility to lead that change. So I often say that we can make good from limitations. We can make good from Africa. As a matter of fact, from scarcity we can make good. We can make good from scarcity. From limitations we can break forth and begin to have a lot. So as African youths, we should not always expect that opportunities will be given to us, doors will be open to us. I have this ideology I hold in my head, that the door somebody opens for you, the person have reserve the right to decide what he wants to do with the door. So if I open the door for you and you walk in, I could tell you walk out, I want to lock the door. But the door we as African youths open for ourselves, nobody has reserve any right to lock that door. and we have that we have that we may have that opportunity to also allow that door open for other young Africans to walk in. So to African youths, open your doors by yourself. And how do you open your doors? You do it through sheer hard work. You do it through determination. You do it through discipline. You work really hard to ensure those doors are opening. And for me, for instance, I may come from a very remote community, but I'm doing as much as possible to ensure that I break free from that limitation. And God is just really starting with me. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, those are great points. It is really important, like you said, to be able to tell our own story. And Steve Jobs have this amazing quote. I'm gonna probably just rephrase it, but it goes something like, "He who tells the story holds the power." So there's
Mm-hmm.
really a lot of power in the stories we tell and the kind of stories we tell. So it's very important to claim that back and take rewrite our own narrative, like you said, especially in young people's minds, because the future
Yes.
is in their hands. And if we want to leave the future of our countries and our systems in a better hand, then that's where we need to start to change the narrative. um,
Very true.
yeah. And you mentioned about creating opportunities for themselves. And a lot of times, and this is just my view, and correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, but a lot of times we would rather collaborate with Western countries than we would with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest hindrances that we have. um
Yeah.
so how do we change that mindset? I'm just curious, because I see it a lot of times. I don't see a lot of Nigerian doctors in Ethiopia. Why not? You know what I mean? Why don't we see the same thing, versus when you go to the UK or the US or literally anywhere else? There are a lot of Nigerian doctors and Ethiopian doctors and South African doctors, So, and I'm just saying this because, we're both in the healthcare field, but it's also true for other professions as
Oh,
well.
that way. True.
Yeah, so how do we break that? Because that is also a narrative, right? It's
Mhm.
like you benefit more if you go there, but some benefits, I think, should not just be measured on their monetary value, and we
True.
should see the bigger picture. So what's your take on that?
So it's a major issue. It's a major challenge which we can date back to post or intra-colonial and post-colonial era. So this is like this is a challenge that has eaten deep into the African nation. Um, when our nations in Africa were being divided and shared amongst the Western nations for colonialism at the time, um, you would agree with me that that was where most of these things started from, and then everybody was, because we had territories in Africa at the time, other nations. You could find that two nations, living side by side, are not speaking the same language, right? Even though we have our indigenous languages, the lingua franca that we had adopted are not same. For instance, Cameroon and Nigeria, where in Cameroon they are speaking French, Nigeria we are speaking English. And then you have that idea, political idea, that, oh, you are a sovereign nation, of course, and we are not seen as brothers and sisters in Africa. However, as against what we have in the Western nations, because you are white, because your skin color possibly is white and stuff, every one of them has almost seen themselves as brothers and sisters. Collaborative efforts can begin to share among these nations. That also has gone on to affect us. For instance, in Africa, you can imagine how bad it has become, that in Africa we need visas to get into Africa, other African nations, right? For me to get into South Africa, for instance, it's almost more difficult to get into South Africa than for me to get into maybe in the UK and so on, and some other countries.
100%.
These are the things that are creating the barriers, and these barriers, I don't want to say They were built on us from our colonial masters alone, because we already supposed to have had the responsibility to change those narrative after the colonial era. But here we still are, still living with those ideas that we are not one as Africans. But I think we need to go back to the roots, that because we have same color, we have the same tone of our skin, we are brothers. And if we begin to teach our children, if we begin to teach the younger generation, if we begin to have platforms, communities, parents telling their children, not just in a nation, but that as African nations, we are brothers and we are sisters. I think when we begin to see differently that way, we can now begin to embrace that brotherhood, that sisterhood that comes with it. So for me, I would say that we shouldn't blame it only on our colonial masters alone. We have the responsibility now as African youths, as young people of Africa, to do business together, to work together. And we can begin to make those narratives, even in the movies. And I discovered that one of the ways to share these stories is from our movies, right? Let's talk about these things, how we are brothers from our movies. I watch a lot of Hollywood movies and I see how they give you narratives of the fact that they own the world and that they are also brothers with other, neighboring nations in, say, Europe, in North America, and so on and so forth. We as Africans can also build that idea. We can build that as a continent. We should begin to shout how that we are one as a continent. Shout that how we should begin to make bold statements that we are not different from other African nations, and our political across all political landscape, we should begin to make policies that would embrace us as brothers and sisters. And in our individual ways as well, in our individual endeavors, we should begin to collaborate. In the healthcare system, we should begin to collaborate. There are different African nations that are suffering from brain drain. We can do inter-collaborative effort to restore some of these things, right? Of course, truthfully, it is more rewarding to go to the Western nations, but we can bring back our manpowers, our expertise. We can become expatriates to our neighboring nations, not just to European nations. So yeah, I think we can start from somewhere.
Yeah, really. It's really about mindset, right? It's just about how you see things, because we have a lot of resources. And it's also very interesting because when you do go to Western countries, even there's a cultural shock because it's completely different. And the fact that we are even willing to adjust to all that instead of going to an African country, which culturally we might speak a different language, but culturally we're not that different. You know what I mean? We
Yeah,
have the
not
same.
different. Yeah,
Yeah. So it is, I think it is time that we realize there's a lot of resource that we have at hand to bring to offer to each other and really maximize on that. um and hopefully, because it has to start somewhere, right? So at the beginning it might not have a great monetary reward, but if you build it you can get it to that point. So it has to start somewhere somehow, and a generation or a couple of generations might have to pay the sacrifice, but I think it would be worth paying those sacrifices. um so obviously you're a storyteller, you're an advocate, and also you're a leader, because all of these things that you're involved in requires leadership.
yeah.
So, and we're on the everyday leader. So how what kind of leader are you? What kind of leader do you think you are? And how do you define everyday leader?
Okay. What kind of leader do I think I am? I think I'm a servant leader. And all the while I've been growing, um, what has been instilled in me is that you get more reward being a servant to others than trying to boss over them because you are a leader or in the name of leadership. And for those who are Christians, the Holy Book told us of how Jesus would say, any one of you who wants to be a leader and wants to lead these ones must first be a servant. to them, and then he showed us how it should be done. Took a bowl and washed the feet of his disciples, and that has been um, my ethics. That has been what has been guiding me through leadership. That you need to serve others to really get the full meaning of leadership, especially in my from the experience that I have. You need to learn the act of service. And so for me, I would refer to myself as a servant leader, one who embodies people's experience, who leads by empathy, who leads with humility. That is how I would describe myself. And so for an everyday leader to me is one who isn't just necessarily a person who holds a title or the microphone to speak, or who is always at the forefront. Of course, leadership is defined as can be defined rather as someone who knows the way, leads and leads the way. So of course you can be in front, but most times or sometimes the everyday leader that I can define would not necessarily be the one in front. He can lead from behind, right? So he is not necessarily the one who holds the title or who is a title holder as per leader or who holds the microphone to speak. So it is that person for me who shows up, who takes responsibility. Is that person who creates, you know, opportunities in his immediate space for others to thrive. That is who I would define as an everyday leader. And so leadership does not really start, with other people, leading other people. An everyday leader should be a leader who is able to lead his environment, lead himself, who knows the needs of others as well, and is able to provide help to the needs of others. An everyday leader too is someone who has mastered the act of leading himself and his environment, thereby bringing people into that space for leadership as well. And an everyday leader for me is also someone who, for instance, embodies, like I mentioned, embodies the stories, the experiences of others. And so he's someone who leads with empathy. He's someone with humility. He's someone who wants others to thrive, and he creates that kind of environment for others to thrive. He's someone who wants to lead change. He finds that there is a challenge in his environment, there is a challenge in his immediate environment. He wants to lead that kind of change. That is an everyday leader for me. And so, if I would say, I would say that everyone who wants to be a leader should be that kind of everyday leader who is not just a master of himself and his environment, also empowers others to do that as well. So yeah, that's an everyday leader for me.
100%. Couldn't have said it better. I love that. The servant leader is just the best model, obviously. Whether you are a religious person or somebody within a faith, still, you know, the leadership style has been proven to be one of the most successful leadership styles. So
Yeah,
that
true.
is truly beautiful. And you mentioned that leadership starts from within oneself. So you're right, because if we really want to break it down, it's not just like a general statement, but if you really break it down, if you cannot um, identify, for example, your emotions, and you
Mm-hmm.
know how to deal with your emotions, then you're not going to be able to communicate the message that you want with whoever is you're leading, right?
Listen, yeah,
Yeah,
true.
because sometimes as a leader, you might be in situations that might make you upset and angry, and you can lash out, and that destroys the relationship that you have with your team members. And I don't know if you know Dave Ramsey. He's a financial wealth development figure on YouTube. He's based in the US, and he talks about this where he says, whenever I have to have a conversation with an employee that I'm not happy with the work they're doing, or I would have to fire them or something, I would give myself 24 hours. And it's very important, that's really what self control is, because sometimes in the moment you would want to say something and you look at whatever is going on in very narrow vision, But then when you take your time, you get to see, oh, okay, maybe I understand their perspective and why they did what they did, sort of thing. So it will help you gain more insight and understanding. So it's very important. Self leadership is really where it all begins. And I think the servant leadership, the Bible is a great guide as to how to be a good leader. Um, I love that. So, you know, we're talking about youth. We've talked about collaborations. We've talked about advocacy. We've talked about servant leadership and empowering others. Um, but we're expected to do all these things, and people are expected to figure out all these things in an environment where distractions are rampant. It's so easy to get distracted because attention is the new currency. And a lot of people are building wealth based on our attention. So, how do young people stay focused despite all the distractions, whether it's social media or anything, or news that is negative? So, how do they stay focused and have meaningful work to contribute, to be productive part of society? What would you advise them?
Okay. So it is true. It is true. When we take our time to look back and look at the generation before, maybe let's say the 20th, before this 21st century, we'll discover how much, if you wanted to do something and you put your heart to it, you would be able to do it and then come out with the kind of results that you want. That statement still holds true up to today, but we have lots of distractions. There are a lot of things that are, jostling with our time, with our attention, such that young people currently will not be able to even give 100% of their attention to one thing at a time. All right. So it is true that we live in a world where visibility, is more rewarded than great value. Um, you have a lot of large following on social media, you are rewarded, you are paid. Whereas someone who is doing real work, giving real value, may not have as much following as you do have, but yet they are rewarded more than you are. But the truth again is that meaningful work takes time, and we cannot beat that. We cannot beat the fact that meaningful work takes time. So my advice is that young people should build before they display. One of my mentors once told me and said that one of the things that he lives by is the idea that he actually does pray to God for God to furnish him first before publishing him. And that is a major prayer that I think I also heard through too. That the Lord should furnish me, that I should furnish myself. I should be able to do groundwork, impactful work, build depth before going on display. Because that helps you to keep focus. Because everyone who must focus on their on value must have mastered that act. And so my advice again would be focus on mastering your craft. Young people in Africa should focus on mastering their craft first before going on display. It is true that visibility is being rewarded. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria, for instance, we have a lot of, a lot of content creators creating. Some of them are creating invaluable things that will not even contribute to you. Some of them even drain the little you have, but yet because they have a lot of following, they are being rewarded. So that is true. But again, they may not stand the test of time. So focus on building depth before displaying. All right, and not just broadcasting yourself. Focus on mastering your craft, not just broadcasting it. Impact really isn't measured by likes. That's the truth. You may not be doing a lot of work, yet you're having a lot of likes, but that is not what impact is measured by. So impact is not measured by likes. It is measured by how much lives you have changed, how much life you have touched. So focus on it. So every young African should be rooted on purpose. Attention becomes a normal byproduct when you pursue purpose, when you pursue impact. When you pursue depth, attention becomes a normal byproduct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Depth is very important for really anyone. And it's not about, it's not specific to professions or anything. It's just as human beings, we need to seek wisdom. And that wisdom is what gives you depth. And it has been made so easy now to access knowledge from any corner of the world, from any uh you know profession, or any subject, right? Unlike the past, where you would have to go to a library, and your library is supposed to have specific books, and if they don't have it, then you never get to have that knowledge. But now
Yeah.
it's in the palm of our hands. That's the good thing about technology, right? It's in the palm of our hands. Anybody who has internet access can access any knowledge from any
In the world.
corner of the world. So
Mm.
we really need to use that to our advantage and build depth to ourselves. And like you said, I think um, as Africans, we have to see things in a bit differently, because there are still so many things as a continent that we need to build and work on. So certain things that we see on social media are really privilege,
Mm.
okay? Because you can't, it is very contradicting for me to be in an African country and talk about, get ready with me, I'm going to whatever. i'm not I'm not trying to take shots at people, but then you have a 7-year old who have to walk 3 hours to fetch water. So you really, some things are truly just privilege, and
Yeah.
we need to stop fooling ourselves, um because like you said, appearing to be that and being that are completely different. So I mean, even even in the Western world, all these influencers, you see the story, the expose story, where they don't actually live like that. And they're in debt to have that
Mm.
appearance on social.
Appearing. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to really be careful what we're consuming, and try to find what the truth is, and really build depths to ourselves, like you said. But I think,
Very, very important. Yeah.
yeah, but I think
Substance,
that's
we should pursue substance actually. Substance is important to pursue
100%, 100%.
because the
um
world is really superficial these days. Very superficial.
yeah,
Very
it really
superficial.
is. And we need to tell our youth, the it could be our cousins, it could be just our friends, it could be our younger brothers and sisters, this is not reality, and this is
This is
not,
not
yeah, this is not impact. So we have to set that example.
very
Yeah,
true.
I love that. Thank you so much, Michael. You're very inspirational. I love the way you see things. I can tell the wisdom and depths you have at a very young age, and I'm just really excited to see what more you can do, and how you're going to influence the younger generation in the future. So I'm really excited, and I'm hopeful if we have people like you from every corner of the continent, then really there's no stopping this movement that we're going to have on the continent. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The Matsi.
How do you say thank you?
Well, we have a lot of
Yes,
languages
yes.
in Nigeria. So which one should I say? Okay, we have
Which,
three major. So we have Nagode from Hausa.
okay,
So you could say Nagode. You could say Dalu, thank you in Igbo.
okay.
Or you could say how do they say it in Yoruba again? Nangode, Dalu. But in my the closest to mine is Benin. So you could say Uwese. So you could say Uwese.
We'll say okay. Yeah.
Uwese.
I think Dalu. Do you say Dalu?
Dalu, yes, Dalu.
Dalu. Okay, I think that's the easiest one. So I'm just gonna go.
Okay. Your name actually sounds like one of those Igbo names anyway. Anaya.
Really?
Yeah, it does sound like an Igbo name in Nigeria.
Listen, you
There's
know,
there's something called Ifunaya. So Anaya,
uh,
Ifunaya, names like that just almost resembles.
it's so funny you say that because it has been I've had this weird experiences, right? I've been to a few African countries, and wherever I go, they think I'm from there. It's like, how can that be?
Yeah,
Wherever I
you
go.
do yeah, you do look like Igbos.
Yeah, so the Nigerians say, "Oh, there are people who look like you can pass for a Nigerian." I'm like, "Okay." I go to Somalia, the same thing. I go to South Africa, the same thing. I go to Madagascar, the same thing. So I'm like, "What is going on?" So like,
You need to come to Nigeria, really.
we're not that different. After all, we're the same. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. All right, thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.